And indeed, I would like to repeat Marietta Radomska's warm welcome. Welcome to the Posthumanities Hub and its extended communities. Now, the Posthumanities Hub is a more than human humanities research group. It's also a platform for very inventive research in more than human humanities, and for new budding constellations and networks and projects and scholars of all kinds. The Posthumanities Hub seminar that I today have the honor of welcoming you to has the title Queer Deaf Aesthetics. And as promised, I need to repeat to you all that this meeting is, as pre-announced, being recorded. Now, it's really my pleasure to welcome you to this seminar on queer deaf studies with speakers Karolina Żyniewicz and Jakob Riis, guest researchers of the Posthumanities Hub. And this, my dears, is an event that's been curated, a special day curated by my dear colleague and the co-director of the Posthumanities Hub, namely Marietta Radomska. My name is Cecilia Åsberg, and I'm a professor at Linköping University and the director of the Posthumanities Hub. And my long-standing companion in this is co-director Marietta Radomska. And Marietta is a philosopher and transdisciplinary gender studies scholar at Linköping University, where she works as assistant professor. She has many strings on her lyre, but she's also the newfangled director of the Eco and BioArt Lab. And as I mentioned, the long-standing co-director of the Posthumanities Hub. She's moreover founder, and indeed worthy of many hearts, like Evelyn, founder of the Eco and BioArt Research Network, co-founder of the Queer Deaf Studies Network, and the International Network for Eco-Critical and Decolonial Research, as well as, I might add, one of the intellectually hottest scholars I know. But without further ado, I give the floor to you, Marietta, to introduce the topic of the day. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you so much for overly generous introduction, and a very warm welcome to everyone here in the room. Right, so I should say that this seminar is kind of co-organized by the Posthumanities Hub, by the Eco and BioArt Lab, but also very much builds on a bunch of years right now work of Queer Deaf Studies Network. And I really am particularly delighted to see also various members and also at least one co-founder in the room of the network, Professor Nina Lycke. But I would like to, before we actually get to the topic of queer deaf aesthetics, or we'll try to perhaps answer or engage with the question, what does queer deaf aesthetics means? I would like to actually maybe first do a little introduction on what queer deaf studies is and why we need to engage with questions of death, dying and mourning through a kind of different than, let's say, traditional modernist type of way. So let me just look a little bit at a paper that I have in front of me, and I will try to draw a little bit from there. So as you probably know from the introduction that you read about this seminar, queer deaf studies is quite an emerging field, which takes research on death, dying and mourning in new directions inspired by queer, feminist, post-humanist, decolonial, anti-racist, and also trans-theorizing. So one could ask, what distinguishes, what does distinguish queer deaf studies from more conventional engagements with deaf in deaf scholarship, like in, for instance, sociology, deaf sociology or anthropology? So actually, perhaps the most crucial point here is the kind of overall critical focus on the framing of death and extinction in the contemporary world, through Anthropocene necropolitics and necropowers of colonialism, post-colonialism, racial and extractivist capitalism. In that sense, in queer death studies, death is approached as an ethical-political issue that is embedded in global power structures. And the field itself pays special attention to systematic necropolitical productions of death in dialogue with theoretical political critiques emerging from political movements for social, environmental and planetary justice and change. It draws on critiques of the dichotomous divides characterizing Western modernity and is marked out through a critical focus on normativities and exclusionary notions of the human, casting the death of those who differ from the normative human subject in terms of gender, racialization, class, geopolitical situatedness, able-bodiedness, sexuality and species as less grievable or not counting at all if we go back to the language provided by Judith Butler. So with critique of necropowers and necropolitics as an ethical political framework, queer death studies aims to queer death. And then, you could also ask, then what does exactly this to queer or queering means? So we look in queer death studies at the notion of queering in kind of broad and open-ended sense as strange making, defamiliarizing, where the critical defamiliarization implied may lead to an opening of other more affirmative horizons, for example, a focus on the entanglement of growing and decomposing, life and death as non/living, or death as vibrancy, like in the work of actually Nina Lykke, an upcoming book, living well with the dead, or embracing death, which you can find in the work of, for instance, Patricia McCormack. So as the field has been unfolding also through the work of Queer Death Studies Network, as I earlier mentioned, this strange making is actually linked to three sort of critical theoretical moves that are also entangled with one another. And those three moves are queering, decolonizing, and posthumanizing. So maybe to just, give a little glimpse here, decolonizing death involves critically dismantling the violent necropowers of colonization, racial and extractivist capitalism, which made death become, quote, life's quiet companion, unquote, for racialized and indigenous people worldwide. Posthumanizing death refers to the systematic problematization of the planetary scale mechanisms of annihilation of the modern human world in their ontological, epistemological, and ethical political dimensions. It takes seriously the issues of responsibility, accountability, and care for and in dying modern human worlds, while remaining grounded in radical critiques of human exceptionalism. And of course, finally, the move of queering encompasses both. On the one hand, it means a kind of open-ended deconstructing of normativities and processes of normalization in various forms. But also, on the other hand, it means deconstructing and undoing of heteropatriarchy, heteronormativity, binary gender, and sexualities governed by reproductive biopowers. So queering death then ranges from challenging modern Western ontologies of death and conceptualizations of the life-death threshold embedded in Christian and Cartesian dualisms, to the more kind of critical focus on the ways in which misogyny, trans and queer phobia lead to social death, and how violence and hate crimes towards non-normative individuals seek to render their lives and deaths as non-grievable. But I mean, what is really important here to remember is that those three entangled moves are actually of very, kind of key theoretical, methodological, and ethical political importance in approaching intersecting structures of global necropolitics emerging out of post-colonial violence, extractivist and neoliberal capitalisms, and the intertwined systems of oppression, so racism, sexism, speciesism, classism, ableism, to name a few. But of course, I mean, then, you know, we could also ask, okay, but I mean, how does it connect to aesthetics? Today's two papers, two presentations will deal very much with art, but also will deal to some extent with the ways of looking, the ways of experiencing, which are also questions in a sense of aesthetics. So if you keep in mind this element of defamiliarizing, making strange, going beyond normativities, I think that this will kind of help us to navigate in today's talks, and I think will also bring very interesting and perhaps unexpected terrains to the fore. So this is my great pleasure right now to, you know, after those some words of boring you with with long introductions, to actually introduce now the speakers, and I will start with the first speaker, Karolina Żyniewicz. Karolina is an artist and PhD candidate in the program Nature Culture Transdisciplinary PhD program at Artes Liberales faculty at the University of Warsaw. She works in a laboratory, mostly at the Institute of Genetics and Biotechnology Faculty of Biology, also at the University of Warsaw, and locates her work in the field of bioart, although she tries to avoid using that term. So Karolina's talk is entitled Safe Suicide, Becoming Immortal and Dying Anyway. And I will now put like spotlight on you, Karolina. And please, yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your introduction, Marietta, and also for the invitation to present somehow my work in frame of this amazing series of seminars. I think I will try to share my screen right now. Let me know if it's visible for you. Is it fine right now?
It
okay.
Is. Yeah, you can just enlarge it to the...
Yes, I will just, yes, I can start. So actually what I'm going to do today is to tell a story and to present an important trajectory. I mean, an important period in my life and my journey through life and death, and also the opposite way, which is possible thanks of certain technology. I mean, tissue cultivating and the development of biotechnology in general. So Safe Suicide is the title of my, let's say, liminal project, art and science project. And as Marietta mentioned in the introduction, I collaborate mostly with the Institute of Genetics and Biotechnology. So this project was mostly realized in one of laboratories of this institute. Mainly a laboratory dedicated for mitochondrial diseases, especially Leber disease. And this laboratory usually work with human cells. That's why it was like a natural decision to collaborate with this laboratory. And what I am going to present is this experiencing different kinds of embodiment, and also something like being one and being many, because it's like transforming, transmattering from my body, from my organism into many liminal beings, laboratory liminal beings. So this is like being transfigured many times during this trajectory. So the beginning was actually, the body and crossing the border of the body. So my blood was taken in order to isolate cells. At the beginning, I was not sure which kind of cell I would like to use, because my idea was to simply derive something from my body in order to kill it, to control this process of killing, to control the process of dying. And actually, the laboratory dictated that we ended up with the decision that we will work with my B lymphocytes. At that moment, I was not conscious that in laboratory condition, something like immortal life is possible. So that was also a meaningful moment for my idea, for my project in general, because I realized that I can not only kill my cells, but I can even give them immortal life and then kill them anyway. So that gave this another layer of understanding in the project. So after the moment of blood taking, the situation became slightly different, because as you can see in this picture, I think shows in a pretty good way what happened, because my body and this fragment of my body became separated. So my cells landed in these cultivating flasks and in technological body, I mean incubator. That's why I started to call them also liminal beings, because as Susan Mary Squire said about stem cells, calling them liminal beings because they are traveling from one body to another. In my case, these cells were not dedicated to be incorporated in a new body, but I started to think about the incubator as a techno body. That's why this travel was also happening then. So that was also the moment when I realized that, yes, I am controlling the life of my cells. And it was a big question if I am at the same time controlling my life at some point. And if like planning this suicidal death of my cells, I am also committing suicide on my person in general. And also it was like being interested in different kinds of death, because I realized that something like suicidal cellular death actually exists. And it's called apoptosis. And I realized that this is amazingly imprinted system, genetical imprint in cell. So I wanted to kill them in that way, evoking this process of apoptosis. And I decided also to use Epstein-Barr virus in order to immortalize them. The immortal life in laboratory conditions means that the limit of divisions is removed in cells. So this is like removal of Hayflick limit, and they are able to divide actually endlessly. Of course, it doesn't mean that they are immortal in that sense that we can't kill them and they are resistant like fully. But this is really symbolic that it actually, I mean, this discovery that cells can be immortal, it was helping to scientists to develop their research and to run this research much longer than before this discovery. So here you can see the observation of the process of immortalizing. And what is really characteristic is that, as you can see, during this immortalizing process, cells get tendency to create groups. These groups are called clamps, and they are like increasingly bigger and bigger. And in the in vivo condition, so in our body, if something like that is happening, we are in deep troubles, because this is a process, a cancerous process. So we are getting cancer, which is like a deadly disease. So it's causing health problems, and also it can be also the reason of death. So as you can see, this understanding of immortality is slightly different in laboratory condition and in our culture in general. The next picture is really funny, I would say, but meaningful for my understanding of this life and death in laboratory condition, and for biology, biotechnology in general, because it was like, I mean, my experience was a mixture of cruelty and care, because I needed to care about my cells in order to prepare the cell line and to have them really in a good condition for killing. And at the same moment, I was deciding about this killing. So here you can see the moment of transport of my cells, because it's pretty easy to evoke something like cultivating shock. So if the temperature is different than like 37 or something, this is really harmful for cells. So one of my colleagues from the laboratory suggested me that, you know, the best way of transporting them from one building to another is to put them in your bra, because it's close to your body, so you are keeping the temperature, and on the other side you have them stabilized, so it's not like shaking of this medium. So that was like really funny and also touching at some point, because I needed to transport them from the basic laboratory to the laboratory with the confocal microscope. So I was like searching for the best solution for a longer time, how to keep them alive until the moment of my intentional killing. And here you can see the picture of cells under confocal microscope, and that was the moment for me of realizing that they are like separate, really separate living being. They have a shape, they have a certain movement. So before, when I was working only with this medium, with like small dots of cells in this cultivating flasks, it was like not touchy, it was not causing emotional reaction. And when I was able to see them suffering, let's say, of course, after administration of something what is poisoning, or after the cultivating shock experience, that was something like really, it was slightly different experience and feeling. And I can say that the person being responsible for the confocal microscope was even more sensitive about what is happening with cells, and asking me how actually do I feel seeing my own cells dying. And yeah, it was a special special experience, because at the beginning I was really touched by I was not like touched by the fact that they are derived from my body and they are dying. It was rather being sensitive about what is happening with this separate living being, which I am able to see. So this ambivalence was all the time present, like this, as I said, this cruelty and care, this being sensitive and blocking of these emotional reactions in order to be able to run my experiments. And here I have a small video which probably gives the best vision of this independence of the cell, because as you can see in this video, this cell looks like really organism having some special features and characteristic. So this possibility of observing cells in real time was even like I think it was the moment of this deepest experience of their independence. So yeah, I recorded few videos like that. And here you can see also a really short video which is showing the artistic phase of this trajectory of this project in general, because I put these pictures from the confocal microscope on the surface of porcelain desks, funeral discs, sorry. And as you can see, they are described with my name, with the date of my birth, and also the date of dying of certain portion of cells being depicted in the picture. So I will start, and this will be short. So the presentation of these pictures is in a form of really symbolic symmetry or something like that. It's like it's built around funeral tradition. And what was also pretty obvious for me in terms of creating the artistic phase of the project was that I don't want to over-create. I need to use the natural laboratory aesthetic, and I started to collect everything what was appearing in my process in form of relics, remains, and here you can see the bioweapon belt with test tubes containing my cells with a bit of medium, of course, stained by trypan blue. Trypan blue is really toxic, and it causes death of cells pretty fast. And this process is done in order to count cells in the toma chamber, because they actually become visible thanks of this staining, coloring. But I decided to collect this bioweapon because actually from the biohazard point of view, I shouldn't move this stuff outside the laboratory because this is biohazardous. But this is the, let's say, the magic of this shift in context from the laboratory condition to the artistic condition, that it was possible to do that. And also this element of risk and the level of risks is really meaningful for the project, I would say. And this contact of the audience with this stuff in the gallery condition was also something interesting to observe. And here you can see also something like, relics, because I was collecting these cultivating flasks with some cell sediment on the bottom, because it was this feeling that I don't want to waste cells, and this situation of wasting and observation of wasting of biomatter was something really bothering me in this process of working with my cells, because it was not only leaving them in the cultivating flask. Sometimes the experiment was not successful, so it was obvious that I need to remove certain part of cells. Some portion of cells is also lost usually during passaging. Passaging, so it's like growing them on the more cultivating flask, so like moving portion of cells from one flask to another. And so it was always the moment that at least few of them had to be wasted. And at some moment I needed to get back to my body again, because I met during a presentation of the first stage of, say, suicide, a director of Laboratory of Cellular Aging, and we decided that maybe I can do something also in this laboratory. So I decided to work with my cells again, this time without immortalizing, and this time with skin cells, fibroblasts. So again, I needed to break the border, to push the border of my skin in this situation, maybe even in more obvious way. And I had a biopsy, and then similarly, like before with the lymphocytes, I needed to start the cell line. So here you can see the process of division of taxidermy and the regular skin, because taxidermy is full of bacteria, so it's risky for cultivating. And what was also magical at some point is this moment when fibroblasts started to be independent, like I said before about T lymphocytes being independent from my body pretty fast. Here, it was really easy to observe the moment when they are like really traveling from this island of the skin, which you can see in this picture on the bottom, and they started to be independent and grow independently. And in this stage, I decided to observe this process of aging, so passing by at some point. And I thought about maybe giving a different name for the title for this part of the project. But on the other side, I realized that this is something like, I am talking about the same stuff, because saying about aging, I am telling also about approaching death moment. So it was strongly connected. So I started to observe the process of cellular aging, analyzing the process. I used 3 different kinds of staining in order to calculate how many cells are in the process of aging, comparing with the cells being still, let's say, young. And at the same time, in the moment when I was doing these stainings, I have a photo session, and my colleague, photographer, did a portrait of myself to make a documentation of what is happening with my skin. So again, it was playing between living and dying and aging in vivo condition and in vitro condition. And here is like the result. Every month I was preparing this kind of visual representation, let's say, and data collection, putting my calculations, pictures after stainings, and this portrait showing possible changes in my skin. Of course, this process of aging in vitro condition was totally uncomparable with what was happening with my face, with my skin. So that was like meaningful to show again this difference, these 2 different dimensions of existence. And during this process, this trajectory, I ran my laboratory notebooks, which are totally normal for everybody working in laboratory, because it's doing notes about calculations, about protocols, about everything what is done in the research. It's really useful to have it and to get back if it's needed. And on the other side, I was also running classical ethnographic observations, autoethnographic observations, which are right now the basis of my PhD thesis. And this was like a more descriptive writing about my experiences, my observations, not only my observations related with the project and my work, but also observations of laboratory life and this understanding of life and death in laboratory conditions as well. And the last moment of this trajectory was my decision of giving myself to science. So giving like the part of my body as a, I don't know, as a gift, as something to say thank you to my colleagues, biologists. And on the other side, I wanted to lose intentionally the control about these fragments of my body, because so far I was controlling that. And this time I decided to just establish the immortalized cell line, I mean, again, lymphocytes. And I put it into liquid nitrogen storage. And I told to my colleagues, look, this is for you. Whatever you need to do with them, do it. And you can just inform me that, okay, your cells were used to this or that. I was giving them before consciously my different tissues like urine, saliva, etc., as a control group in experiments. But this was really symbolic that I am doing the process from scratch, just in order to give it to you, and you are the owner right now of this matter derived from my body. And approaching the end, I will just mention a situation which was really also, I think, it allows me to discover certain differences between laboratory condition and gallery condition. Because during an exhibition in Właśnie Gallery in Gdańsk in 2019, I actually got a chance to perform the killing of my cells in gallery. So I was killing my cells using hypochlorite. And of course, I did a rehearsal before, checking how much of this substance I need to add in order to get a pretty fast reaction. But what was really painful and also, I think, informative for me in this experience was that for the audience, it was not obvious that I am killing my cells. They knew that I am doing something biological, but the atmosphere, the silence, the sacral scenario, it was not giving them like an easy answer what I am doing actually. So it was even kind of boring for the audience. So it means that the really easy shift from the laboratory condition to the gallery condition, from the artistic context point of view, it was maybe not enough. So this is the question: what should be done in terms of aesthetic to make this death readable and obvious? Yeah, and I think I will stop in this moment, although, yeah, of course, I would have a lot of different experiences to share, but I'm really curious of your questions and comments. And I am really happy also that I am today presenting together with Jacob, because I will ask these questions actually right now, if my death cells would be a material for Jacob's work. But of course, I will wait for your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Karolina. I think we can stop sharing the screen. Yes, and what should I do here? I think that I should probably like remove the spotlight so that we see everyone, I guess. Yes, so I think that, I forgot to say technical side of today's sort of session. So after each presentation, we'll have approximately 5 minutes for kind of clarification questions or urgent burning questions that you'd like to ask with regard to that particular presentation. And, after both presentations and both kind of, burning question sessions, we'll have a little break and then we'll enter the actual discussion. So if you have something that needs fermenting, you can wait. But if you have something that needs to be just, thrown into the middle of this room right now to Karolina's paper, please feel free to pose your questions. So I see Nina raising hand.
Yeah, I'm jumping in. Thank you so much, Karolina. A lot of things to discuss, but I have an enormously nerdy questions, and that's because why you use the Epstein-Barr virus, and what's the role of the Epstein-Barr virus? Because of course Epstein-Barr virus is related to cancer, and I'm actually involved in another project which has put Epstein-Barr virus very, very central. And another comment and question, so that's the nerdiest question. Another thing that we might be, which we can discuss later, is the relationship to cancer, which I think also with the biopsy, etc. I think that there is in the whole process a relationship to cancer, which in a way is the most uncontrollable, scary disease that you can somehow think of. So I somehow saw this kind of very strong opposition because you focus so much also on control, not being in control, etc. Yeah, well, so, well, two questions, but the nerdish one is for these 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Should I answer right now, or we don't have time, Marietta?
We have time, so you can answer this question.
Okay,
and I see
thank you very much for your questions. 2 questions actually, Nina. And yes, your observation is totally correct, and it was also the point of my fascination that actually, as I said before, in this whole body condition, in vivo condition, if we have immortal cells, this is cancer or tumor. So this is like deadly disease, and we don't want to have it. And the problem actually is that this is uncontrollable. And the cure is about maybe trying to get a control of that. So for sure, this like totally opposite meaning, opposite dimension of this the same process, because in our body the same process is happening, that there's something in genetical construction of the cells is not going well, so we have some mutation which is not acceptable, and all of a sudden our cells instead of dying at some moment, because the cell has this limit of division, so this is the moment, okay, I am dying, I am removing myself in order to give space for new cells, healthy cells. But if the cell actually doesn't have this limit, this is like growing, dividing without any limit, and this is pretty problematic. And saying about Epstein-Barr virus, sometimes it's also using of HPV virus, which is also related with, for instance, ovaries cancer. So as you said, also these viruses are also responsible for increasing the chance of having cancer, because it's not obvious that a person being infected by these viruses will for sure develop a cancer, but it's like increasing the chances. And again, what is happening in the body in vivo condition is creating the cancer, but we can use the same virus in laboratory condition in order to remove this limit of division intentionally. And this is useful because we can run our research on these cells for much longer. That's why the moment when probably you know the story of HeLa cells and Henrietta Lacks, and the moment when it was like discovering that it's possible that cells are able to survive for longer in laboratory, so we can run the research for much longer. That was really a breaking point for biological research. So I think this opposite direction, 2 directions actually, they are really, really fascinating. And that's why I think biology and biotechnology, what is happening right now in biotechnology, is so fascinating for not only for biologists, but for people from the area of humanities, from the area of art, because we have many meanings. That's why I am saying also about transmattering, in that sense that this is like changing of matter, but also this is changing of meanings and language, because what is understood in culture in a certain way, all of a sudden in this in vitro post-nature gets totally different meaning, and we can play with these meanings, trying to maybe build a new value, new quality.
Is the Epstein-Barr virus specifically potent in terms of, I mean, there's a lot of viruses, hepatitis virus, coronavirus, etc. So is the Epstein-Barr virus particularly potent?
Because this is I don't have a precise knowledge how it works, because it's changing the genetical construction of the cell. But I know that this is a virus which is normally like equipment in the laboratory. That's why I use the Epstein-Barr virus, because the laboratory usually uses this kind of virus. And this virus is actually developed and grew in monkey cells. And then it's like just using this medium, which is with this virus, to cultivating of our cells in order to, this is like a little bit similar to coronavirus, that, this is like, the virus is kind of parasite on the cell. So it's changing, the genetical code. My decision was pretty simple, because the laboratory was working with this kind of virus. But I know that there are many different ways of transforming cells into immortal cells. It's not just using of this virus.
Okay, I think that now I have to close this part of the session. And I mean, there are already questions popping up in the chat, so they will wait for the joint Q&A. But now I would like to actually, big thanks to Karolina and to also the discussant. And I would like to pass the baton to Jacob, I should kind of pronounce properly Jakob Riis, who graduated from Copenhagen University in 2014 and who is an art historian. Between 2009 and 2014, curator assistant at the Danish Museum of National History, Hillerød, and then between 2014 and 18, head of teaching and curator at Ordrupgaard, probably bad pronunciation, in Copenhagen. And currently Jacob is a PhD student at art history at Aarhus University. So the floor is yours, my dear. And the title is Are We Dead Yet?
Yeah, and I'll just share my screen here, 2 seconds. And you can all hear me, right?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. I still don't really trust this internet connection. So if I have any problems, please let me know, and we'll take the 5-minute break then, and I'll reboot the connection. All right. I'm Jakob, and I'm doing a PhD at Aarhus University on corpses in contemporary art. Marietta is my co-supervisor, and I'm currently doing my stay abroad, a virtual stay abroad at Linköping University in Sweden. First of all, I being an art historian, when I say contemporary art, please note that I work with the works that start off in the 80s, and the newest are 5 to 10 years old. So just to answer your question, Karolina, I think, your work is a very good candidate. I would like to see some distance to it, though, because I find it kind of hard to analyze things as they are happening. So maybe I'll include it. I really like that idea of your cells when they're taken from you. Are they still you, or are they not you anymore? Are they new life forms? Are you spawning new life forms? And what kind of ethics does it entail? Are you killing yourself, or are you killing something else, something new? I mean, that's worth to think about. Well, anyway, today I want to show you the art I'm currently working with, and discuss how best to understand it. Now, death has always occupied humanity. I mean, there's no culture without certain ideas, rituals, or the like to frame death and make it either meaningful or at least manageable. In this process, art can be a particularly useful tool to deal with ideas and concepts that somehow exceeds words or is hard to appropriate within our language. Death very quickly becomes a question of either or, especially since the Enlightenment period and its heritage of individualism based on the subject. It serves to anthropomorphize, that's a word, death. As I guess in what could be called a post-human project, I intend to gather a range of artists who are all working to reformulate or at least question the relatively anthropomorphic limits between life and death, turning it from an either-or into a myriad of forces, affects, foldings, and becomings. I should change here. Ideas on subjects and objects are far from irrelevant to these artists, but they are used more as things to untangle or entangle, really, to disturb, discuss, rework, rather than being essential categories. I started out by looking for human corpses. As I proceeded, I found that this category is rather fluid and contain a more varied landscape of bodies and objects. It's far more varied than I initially imagined. But what all these artists share is some relation to the dead or dying human body. And then each artist proceed to unravel it in different form, give it different forms. Now, when using as their primary material the liminal human body, they are all working within a somewhat contemporary political framework, where human beings are dying under extraordinary conditions, and the project is thus tied into Mbembian-inspired necro-aesthetics. But as my project is to place or create a place for these works within art history, I focus on how these works reconfigures large-scale political situations into disturbing bodily sensations. From situations to sensations, that's a real key here. And I decided to call it something else. Now, necro-art, corpse art, corporeal art, cardio art, these are all the names that I'm currently working with, and suggestions are welcome. If you have any good ones, I'll be happy to receive them. To exemplify the spectrum of corpses in art and to give you a baseline for discussion, or give us a baseline for discussion, I want to show you the artist I'm currently working with. I want to show 3 different kinds of dead bodies. When I'm referring to corpses, I should stress that I have a very broad conception of what that might mean, ranging from the shoes I wear right now to the dirt, soil, and nature itself. And these are the corpses we're going to look at now. We need to nullify the idea of the putrefying corpses of horror movies and video games. In necro-art, this concept is much broader and much richer and does not necessarily encompass abject qualities. It's not meant to scare you, it's meant to do a lot of other things to you. First of all, this is Hannah Wilke, and this is a living corpse. It's her final artwork called Intravenous, referring both to her inner Venus and the medical technique of intravenous strips or intravenous anything. The work was shown after Wilke died from lymphoma, that's a form of cancer. And it consists of photos, films, drawings, objects, such as her own hair, which fell off during chemotherapy. And we might call this her final performance. What we see is a woman struggling with a disease, but also struggling within a medical system or institution set up to save lives, but also dealing and distributing death. There are different becomings at play here. Being increasingly reliant on medical technology, she's becoming a sort of cyborg, a medical machine. You see her hooked into some sort of machine here. She's also in a co-becoming with medical chemistry. She's taking a lot of morphine, for example. I just finished an analysis of Derek Jarman's movie Blue, which I would recommend everybody. You watch that movie. It's the greatest movie I never saw. And you'll get that joke as you watch the movie. Anyway, he says somewhere, because he was dying of AIDS and he got a lot of morphine. He says that we were lulled into believing that morphine dispelled pain rather than making it tangible. Now, that's a truly horrifying predicament to be in. It's not a question. The pain does not disappear. It makes you able to to sense it as something else than pain. Well, anyway, she's in a co-becoming with this chemistry. She's becoming medical chemistry. And she's, of course, in a becoming with the disease. Wilke is made into an object, not of sexual desire, but of medicine. I mean, hopefully you can all see how she plays with or crosses the two on these photographs, both kind of the Venus figure and the medical object. These objectifications and co-becomings that she reveals to us play a part in the destruction of her subject. And through it all, she tries to remain human and employ different strategies to keep or regain her womanhood, or personhood, if you prefer it like that. You can see her playing with sexualized female Venus figures, with the mother and the one I've included on the right here, the witch. They are all in an attempt to show us and fight back against the slow disappearance of her subject, both caused by her disease or sickness. I'm not really sure what to call cancer, if it's a disease or whatever it is. But she's also being destroyed by a medical system. The hospital becomes a horror chamber. Is it treatment or torture? Wilke shows us a dark vision of the hospital, sealed off from the rest of society, as a liminal zone of social exclusion containing liminal beings, a zombie land full of living dead. She is made into a living corpse by institutional objectification and social exclusion. Now, the other, or the second type of corpse I want to show you is the surrogate corpses. Their bodies are exchanged for something else, still framed as bodies by the artworks. Now, to the right, you see Teresa Margoliouth's work, NLA. It's from 2003, if I remember correctly, wherein she uses water that has been used to wash off corpses before autopsy. The dead are victims of the Mexican war on drugs, or drug war, and are rendered unidentifiable by the cartels. Teeth are pulled out, fingers cut off, and such. You can imagine the rest, I suppose. In this work, the water is made into soap bubbles and sent out among the experiencers. The production of meaning is thus structured by and happening in the participators when they're touching and interacting with the soap bubbles. Meaning is happening on the skin and in the body of the experiencer. These works utilizes subjectification, meaning the soap bubbles acquires agency or life from corpses by revitalizing the dead in their new soap and water body and letting them move and interact with the participators. Margoliouth highlights the in-betweenness of corpses, the spectral qualities, and works by way of vitalization or subjectification, depending on which school of thought you're using. These are dead who have come back to life. This kind of interactive surrogate body or corpse is also present in the work you see on the left, which is Felix Gonzalez Torres's work Portrait of Ross. It's from 1991, where a pile of sweets weighs the same as Ross Laycock. Ross Laycock is Felix's boyfriend who died from AIDS. The pile of sweets weighs the same as when he was diagnosed with HIV and AIDS, or AIDS. As the candies gets eaten, the work performs the same sort of dance macabre as Ross did. It makes the participator into the disease, or at least the destroyer of the body. On the other hand, there is the sacramental or cannibalistic idea where he lives on in us. The participator is framed in a paradoxical position as both salvager and destroyer. And again, like with NLR, meaning or knowledge is framed by interaction. I mean, it's in our mouth and in our taste buds. The water and sweets are some sort of raw material agent, agential human clay structured into bodies. Now, the next bodies are not sort of clearly defined. They are atmospheric corpses. Here, the corpse is gone or has receded into a loosely structured object. On the left, again, it's a Margolius work. It's called vaporization or vaporization, I guess. She uses the same water as before, but this time it's made into a fog, which engulfs the participator and connects bodies through vapor in a kind of sort of revitalizing co-becoming. It's like meeting and touching and becoming one with a ghost. Some of the vulnerability of the identified corpses is communicated in the sensation on vapor touching the skin. I think it's safe to assume that our conception of the socio-political situation in Mexico is influenced, perhaps even structured around the experience of vapor. We literally have the ability to absorb the death. And here's the question: do we have the ability to absorb meaning and knowledge too? Is this really knowledge that isn't in words but is in the body, or cannot be words but only vapor? Again, this constitutes a certain kind of ethics, not structured by the mind but by the body. The one you see on the right, I hope you can see the picture or the photograph, is from Sally Mann's work, What Remains. In this work, she explores what happens to the body after death. And as the title states, what remains, both the memory and the materiality. In this book, she first explores putrefying corpses at a body farm in Tennessee. She also photographs her dead dog, some bone from that. But by first exploring that, and then she proceeds to landscape and sites. The photography you see on the right is from the Antietam battlefield. It was one of the bloodiest battles in the American Civil War, yet there are no traces of death here, only nature. But by first establishing how corpses return to Earth and then exploring landscape as a site for death, she kind of crossbreeds corpses with nature. She created an atmospheric corpse, a spectral corpse. And with these two works, or in these two works, there's something inescapable about atmospheric corpses. The fog engulfs us, it attaches to the skin, it goes into our lungs, it penetrates us, it forces itself upon us. And in man, nature itself becomes a product of death. Corpses are everywhere. They're not only dead objects, they nurture life, they are life, they shape things. And please remember that the next time you go into the forest or take a walk anywhere. Now, I'm well aware that I read all these artworks as in a somewhat anthropomorphic light. I read soap bubbles, sweets, and trees as beings that resembles humans. But as I hinted in the beginning, it's not really a question of either or, but a question of disturbing and queering in the broad sense anthropomorphic categories by locating or introducing the non-human in the human and the other way around. Usually these works are referred to as necro-aesthetics, which a term commonly defined as aesthetics directed towards a necropolitical, globalized, neoliberal reality. And related to Achille Mbembe's idea of necropolitics and Michel Foucault's biopolitics. And indeed, most of the artists communicate biopolitical situations and territories through aesthetic means. However, this sort of patriarchy of politics within necroaesthetics is exactly why I suggest the term should be applied, if at all, cautiously. I would argue that usually political concepts are somewhat distant from the sensory capacities of the human body. However, this is exactly what these works connect. Large-scale political situations are reconfigured into playful or disturbing sensational experiences. They are feelings on the skin. They are our taste, abject disgust, or nausea. Meaning, political or ethical experience is not a case of metaphysics or analysis per se, but a bodily sensation, and they are an experience. And it highlights our body as world interpreter. To my mind, the politicized framework of necro-aesthetics can have, and I do mean can, because it doesn't always happen, far from it, but it can have a tendency to overlook the aesthetic experience and the matrix in which aesthetic experience is constructed. This is problematic as we are dealing with art, not reality, and that's whatever reality might mean to you. The basis or territorial ground for politics and ethics within the works is the aesthetic framing and experience. It should thus be handled with no insignificant amount of attention, as it grounds, shapes, and influences the ethical categories in the work. Now, and here's my final sort of question. How can we or I redefine or rephrase necroaesthetics to make it absolutely clear that aesthetic sensation frames the given necropolitical topic, and that whichever ethics might arise out of this are sensationally grounded or situated? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacob. So big applause as well. And I think that now we could have like 5-10 minutes for clarification, like direct burning questions to the paper. And I see Karolina raising her hand, so please go on.
Thank you, Jacob, for your presentation. I discover at least a few things which are new for me and very useful. Just a quick question for this moment. What is the position of the notion of abject in your research? Because you didn't mention it openly, but I suppose that this is something what is present in your research.
Yes, I'm not really sure where it's placed, because I kind of have a feeling that abject is something that happens when our language or whatever means we have of understanding and making sense of things sort of feels a limit coming up. So the abject is something that we cannot sort of consume or make into something meaningful. And a lot of this project is exactly asking questions to those things that are difficult to make meaningful. So I'm pretty cautious when using Christopher's idea of the abject, because I kind of think that it's a deficit in our language conception, or a deficit in post-structuralism, more than it's really a true thing. Does that make sense at all?
It's really interesting. It's my understanding is a little bit different, but maybe it's the topic for the further discussion, not like for right now.
If you ask me what it is, then it's that which is spewed out of the body, which is left, which comes out and has no point to it. It's the skin we shed. It's mucus, and it's shit, and it's vomit, and it's all those kind of things. But I think really it's more than that, and I think that mostly it's because our intelligible forms are unable to process something. It becomes abject.
So for you, the cadaver is not a form of abject.
I really try to not feel that.
Okay, it's your definition, and I respect it fully.
But it's still hard for me when I'm working and then I'm having lunch. I can't really sort of work with Salaman and eat at the same time, but I really try to.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Any other kind of, I think we have some space of, 2-3 minutes for kind of urgent questions or comments, particularly about this presentation. And I mean, if just in case, I think that, we'll have also like more space in the kind of during discussion, but I mean, is there anything that you need to ask right now, want to know, that is directly linked to maybe artworks or some reflections? Anyone? Anina?
Yes, I mean, I just relating to I mean, thank you for yet another very interesting presentation. I was curious, are you trying to de-objectify the corpses through the artworks? And do you think that some of these artists actually also are working on de-objectifying the corpses? For example, Sally Mann and Hannah Wilke, I mean, others for that matter as well. Yeah, well, that's I mean, it's a rhetorical question somehow, because I do myself think that they are doing that, but I was curious about.
Yes, they are definitely trying to de-objectify corpses.
Yeah, okay.
Because essentially, if we make them abject, we put them into a space where our, how should I say, our CPU is unable to process them. And the point of these artists is that we need to process them. So I don't know if I'm trying to, I am, but I guess mostly because the artists, I understand them as trying to objectify corpses. And it's a difficult task. It's like eating shit. Do you really want to do that?
I definitely don't agree. I think it's easy to de-objectify corpses.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Especially if you're capable of loving something.
I think it's not. I don't think it's easy, but I do think that that the de-objectification is a very interesting process, in a very interesting artistic process. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, of course, I mean, this, as you know me, probably I would kind of go in the direction, which is not your project, Jacob, but I mean, the kind of direction of what kind of other, elements around us we relate to, and we don't even think about object, precisely as you were talking about the shoes, right? And, other things. Right, but I think that maybe now we could take, yeah, I mean, maybe not 5, maybe 7-minute break. So we could reconvene 35, like sharp, please. And we continue with a joint discussion. So I already saw one question that was earlier posted in the chat that we can open the discussion with. And I mean, please, for those of you, yeah, I mean, who would like to ask questions, just write your name, or you can write your question, but you can also just write your name that you have a question, then we let you pose it. So yes, I mean, without further ado, enjoy your coffees, teas, or whatever else. And exactly as Cecilia is saying, corporeal comfort break for 7 minutes, we reconvene 35. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, slowly coming back. Hopefully the entire crowd is now coming back. Yes, so I think that I would like to open, so once again, just to remind everyone, please, if you have fermented in your heads any questions or comments, you're more than welcome to kind of note your name basically in the chat, so I can kind of just go one by one. But I mean, there was earlier question from the first sort of like urgent question session pose directly to Karolina from Olga, who I'm not sure if, who is actually still in the room with us, but I would just let myself read the question. Karolina, thanks so much. May I ask you about security measures to exhibit the work in the art space? So, that's the usual kind of bioart question, I think.
Yeah, this is pretty, let's say, usual and traditional for any discussion. So I am actually not surprised. What can I say? It's like maybe I will be focused on this example of this performative killing of my cells, because before I was presenting only this visual representation, so this porcelain discs and this remains, but still they were closed. So even if it was like cultivated bottle, it was closed. But the problem could appear in case of this performative killing. And the thing is that it was actually responsibility of the curator, I would say, and the decision of the institution, because I was not dealing with any official bureaucracy, let's say, around that. And the exhibition happened in the series titled Art and Science Meeting. So before this exhibition, which I was participating in, many different bioart exhibitions happened there. For example, Symbiotica exhibition, type an area exhibition, and they happened to deal with biomatter before, so I think they were experienced already, because even in terms of organizing a laboratory for myself to prepare my cells for the performance, they were really well organized. So it was nothing special happening. If you are interested in, I don't know, dealing with bioethics committee or something, nothing like that happened. I know that in case of different exhibitions, different countries, different contexts, it can be different. For instance, I read about a case with exhibition done by Symbiotica, when it was like dealing with this question if they are allowed to use, for instance, human cells, but it was the characteristic of the exhibition and the gallery that it was problematic, maybe not from the perspective of biohazard stuff or etc., rather about this anthropocentric perspective that maybe like dealing with human material will be hard to digest for the audience. So nothing like that, nothing problematic happened on my way of exhibiting of this project. I don't know if it's satisfying to you, Olga. We know each other, so maybe you will be able to ask directly whatever is like coming to your mind as well.
Yeah, so Olga, if you have any kind of comment or, sort of further engagement with that, feel free to. I hope Olga is still with us. Okay. So Olga is in transport, so then, we have to, I think, be satisfied with that. Is there any, anyone else would like to jump in with questions? You were kind of, kept quiet for like limit of 5 minutes. Now there is space, the space is yours. So please, to either Karolina or Jakob or to both of them. So yeah, shout out or raise your hand or write your name or whatever.
Can I ask Karolina something?
Oh, go on, of course.
How, I was just wondering, when you take your own cells and turn them into, I guess, what we could call an art object or something like that, how do you perceive your cells? do you perceive them as objects, or are they still you? What I'm asking is how, because I'm trying to fit it in with kind of a more capitalistic approach to the art world. What's your own view on your own selves?
Yeah, it was also a question which I posted at the beginning of the project, because I was curious how I will feel dealing with my own cells, especially killing them. And it was pretty strange, because when I started the project, I felt really emotional, and my colleagues from the laboratory were even like laughing on me that, oh, art is coming, putting everything in this dimension, like, oh my God, this is like dealing with cells, they are suffering, they are able to feel pain, etc. And during my work, at some moment, I started to have pretty the same approach, maybe not like laughing on other artists doing similar stuff, but I got used to working with myself, and I became maybe more resistant, and it was getting this perspective that this is a material of research. It was like something external, and especially when I was like observing them under the confocal microscope, I felt, I think I mentioned it also in my presentation, I felt rather that I am dealing with something independent. I was not feeling this connection that this is part of myself. And and I can empathize with them because of that. This empathy and this understanding maybe of what is happening with them was rather from this perspective of something external. How can I do something like that, something what is living? How dare I do something like that? Because maybe I shouldn't decide about dying, living and dying of them. So it was increasingly less emotional, I would say, but in that sense that it's not me anymore. It's something, totally independent. I don't know if it's satisfying you. Okay.
Okay, fantastic. Then I'm passing the baton to Margarita, raising hand.
Hi, and everyone, and congratulations to Jakob and Karolina for the incredible presentations, which I really enjoyed. And I would just like to comment quickly of what the two of you just mentioned, because Karolina, you've been working a lot on the idea of liminal and in relation to your body, but listening to you, what came to, but before I forgot, I saw Karolina's performance and it was great. So let's hope that performances can take place again soon so we can all enjoy it. But so there is, while I was listening to you, it came to my mind how there is this somehow contradicting feeling of ownership on our own bodies, that on the one hand is very important in terms of social relationalities, and at the other term from a biological perspective, and I know this may sound problematic, it shifts the paradigms. All our bodily fluids, all our bodily discharges, are they ours or not? What happens when they exit the orifices of our body, maybe sweat membrane or our anus? And why there is this feeling of ownership conjoined with identity? It's an open question, but this also has to do with the objection that you were talking about earlier, and de-objectifying corpses. We are always objected by, we are objected by something, by by getting used to it. And this is a very strong process in working with biological matter in art, and I guess also in other contexts. You lose the objection. I mean, certain things have such strong smells, and then you get used to it. And then it's somehow an opposite process, but it's like when Karolina says, I started to see my cells as something independent. It happened to myself too. So these are, as I said, just some comments that came to my mind that reconnect what you've been talking about earlier. Maybe you want to take on from here.
If you like.
Yeah, thank you, Margarita, for your comment. I think what you stress in what you said a few minutes ago about this relation between identity and the ownership, I think this is something meaningful. And what came to my mind about objectivity and abstract is also something strange about tissue cultivating in general, because the definition of object, for instance, derived from Kristeva, is that whatever is passing the border of our body, I mean, it's like the hair, which are we losing for some reason, saliva, urine, as excrement in general. Usually this is something which is disgusting, which is rejected. But when we are doing something like deriving cells from our body, I think for me it was not objectual at all. I was not able to imagine that for someone it would be objectual. Although I observed my colleagues in laboratories, and I experienced something like that. Some of them were a little bit disgusted by the stage of blood taking. They actually didn't like much this stage when they actually need to isolate cells from this blood sample. And then when cells are isolated and they are floating in medium, everything is fine. This is like purified all of a sudden. And this is maybe because of this act of decision. And also, this is the transformation. It's not the fragment of the body anymore. I mean, the blood stage is the last stage when we are still dealing with this organism, like human, for instance, organism. Then we have these cells, and they are related with this laboratory condition, and they started to be material for research. So it's not objectual anymore. And I haven't observed, at least yet, someone feeling like uncomfortable working with tissues because of this feeling that this is something derived from body. So yeah, this is a really amazing transfer and shift from one perspective about body and vision about body to something totally different. And something is even like hard to observe that what is living is less valuable than what is artificial, because everything what is used in laboratory, some medias, reagents, devices, everything is more expensive. So it's for instance, it's calculating, doing some experiment. It's easier to remove, to waste a portion of cells because they have this option of reproducing, than losing some reagent, which is like you paid for that, like, I don't know, €1,000 for a small test tube of the reagent. So yeah, this is also something like the value of the body is maybe also something transformed when we deal with biomatter in laboratory. So yeah, I don't know if it's like it was more common than
yeah, and I think that now I would like to take us in a bit different directions, because there are new questions popping up on chat, and I think very exciting questions. And I will, because I mean, we don't have much time left, so I will just let myself, I hope the people in the room are fine with that. I will just let myself to read them out loud. So thank you. So this is from Sean Chua. Thank you both for your wonderful presentations. I have a question about intimacy. Often when we speak of death or corpse, we gravitate towards notions of the abject. And I'm curious, by querying this notion, especially through art, does it open up the possibility of a space for intimacy with another register of dying? I'm reminded also of the quote earlier about morphine as a way of feeling pain. So, I mean, would the two of you, and I don't know, maybe Jacob, because this kind of, I think there is a direct connection. Would you like to start? And but both of you can, take that question.
Yeah, sure. I'm not a space for intimacy. I'm not really sure if you mean that as a certain connection with corpses, then I would say these artists certainly suggest that it is possible to interact with corpses as in other ways than sort of abject feelings. That you really should take a bath in the ashes of your father, or that you really should somehow try to revitalize and honor and all that kind of thing, have intimacy with corpses. And I'm not talking necrophilia here, not in that sense at least. I'm talking about you should definitely try to, or this is not me talking, this is what I get from the artworks. I'm not a politician. At least I try not to be. But I really think that the art certainly suggests that we should sort of be intimate with corpses in different ways, and we need other ways of mourning and sort of accepting death. I'm not sure what the end goal for that would be, but yes, I would say that. Yeah, sorry, I just need to read the question. Yes, it opens a space for intimacy with the corpse that are different from what is usual now.
I think that then, maybe we could take the next question. Also, if Karolina, if you want to, have some comments or something, I mean, feel free to. But I mean, this is also
I would prefer to maybe give a space for the next question because we are running out of time.
Yeah. So let's take that. But I mean, okay. So thank you both for very interesting presentations. I have a question for Jacob regarding his material. Why these specific artworks and how are they analyzed? I guess I'm interested in the method used in your research. Is there a queer death method? I also have but connection, so yeah, so I mean that's why it's kind of like vocalized by me. So
perhaps Marietta is the best to answer this. If there is a queer death method, I haven't found one. I guess if I had to say something, I kind of employ a Masumian method of exemplifying works along with theory, and then as to what theory, I guess it's sort of the Deleuzian. It's of a Deleuzian school or post-structuralist school. Right now I'm also reading Rosie Braidotti. I just discovered her for real. I knew her, but I hadn't really read. Yeah, Bentley, let's get. I hadn't really read her that deeply before. So. But I guess I would say kind of that school really, and originally as how I found the artworks, it's a bit strange because I started off in a different place. I started off by I started off by reading Peirce and he has those three categories: the symbol, the icon, and the index. And the index is the only one that actively involves material qualities. Read purse, people, read purse. Well, anyway, he actively sort of employs material qualities within his system, within his semiotic system, and I found that really intriguing. So I looked for indexical corpses, real corpses and indexical corpses, and then it sort of snowballed from there. And I'm not really reading purse anymore, but that was kind of the. Oh, I'm having more guests now. That was really where it started. Hi.
Thank you so much, Jacob. And maybe, because we are now really sort of, approaching 15, I will just say that I think also one of the components of queer deaf studies is queering methods. So in a sense, I don't think that we can give you the final answer, what is exactly the queer deaf method, because it actually very much consists in, kind of questioning the very sort of, taken for granted methods in various forms of traditional academic or artistic research. And I mean, I would of course love to invite everyone to, kind of also read up a little bit on queer deaf studies, and there is some literature actually mentioned earlier in the chat. And stay connected. We have the Queer Deaf Studies Network has its website, queerdevstudies.net. So you can stay in touch basically via also social media with us and follow what kind of things are developing and what kind of events are taking place. I would like to thank our fantastic speakers today. So big applause to Karolina and Jacob from everyone. I also would like to say that the next time we meet, and obviously, big thanks to all the audience, you were fantastic. Next time we meet on the 17th of June, which will be a sort of a big occasion because that will be the last Posthumanities Hub seminar this semester, and simultaneously a big launch of the Eco and Bio Art Lab. I see Cecilia is already, showing hands. Focused really on arts of non-living matters. So we won't run away from art. There will be more bio art, there will be more art, there will be more kind of queering methods and queer ways of thinking. So thank you all once again. It's been a pleasure. This video, as you know, has been recorded, will be available probably around summer or early autumn on YouTube. So do follow us, and yes, and see you next time. Thank you so much once again. Take the best of care.